But when he saw her, a lone soldier in dusty cowboy boots, eyes full of storms, he said 6 words that would change everything. "You're coming with me. No questions." What he didn't know was that she wasn't alone, and the road ahead would lead them all somewhere no map could ever find. If stories of unexpected kindness, quiet resilience, and the kind of love that heals you from the inside out speak to your heart, make sure to subscribe to Soul Moment Story and journey with us through tales that linger long after the last word. Now let me tell you what happened. The heat rippled off the asphalt like waves off a dying sun. The sky over southern Arkansas stretched wide and empty, pale blue bleeding into white near the horizon. A solitary bus stop stood at the edge of a forgotten stretch of highway. Cracked bench, rusted roof, and 2 souls the world seemed to have misplaced. Eli Brooks slammed the door of his pickup shut. The clang echoed down the quiet road. He stood for a moment, wiping sweat from his brow, eyes locked on the figure hunched over on the bench. She wasn't begging, wasn't crying, just sitting there, straight-backed, shoulders squared in a faded army jacket and a pair of scuffed-up cowboy boots. At her side, a little girl, maybe 6, lay curled against her hip, asleep or close to it. Their only luggage was a canvas duffel bag stuffed too full it seemed, threatening mutiny. "You stranded?" Eli asked, his voice low and dry like gravel. The woman didn't flinch. She turned her face slightly toward him, strong jaw, sunburned cheeks, dark circles under her eyes like bruises time had forgotten to heal. "No," she said evenly. "Just waiting." Eli stepped closer, the scuff of his work boots loud in the hush. "Buses haven't run this route in 2 years." Silence. He looked down at the child. Pale hair, damp lips cracked. "That your little girl?" "Yes." "She doesn't look like she can wait 2 years." The woman's shoulders rose, then fell. A breath of defiance, a breath of defeat. "We've waited longer for less." Eli took off his cap, ran a hand through his long, sun-bleached hair, then looked her square in the eyes. "I'm not asking." "You're coming with me." Her head snapped toward him. "Excuse me." "You heard me." "Get in the truck? You don't even know me." "I don't need to," he said. "But I know that kid's dehydrated, and you're damn near empty yourself. So either you trust me, or you wait here and hope someone else with half a conscience shows up before nightfall." She hesitated. Then, "How do I know you're not some psycho?" Eli pointed to his truck. "If I were a psycho, I'd have started with candy and a lie. I brought neither." A pause. Then she chuckled, just once like she hadn't in years. "That's a terrible pickup line," she muttered. "I wasn't picking you up," Eli replied. "I was picking you up off the ground." It was enough. She stood lifting her daughter with practiced care and followed him without another word. The ride was quiet. The girl Emma, as she'd murmured once before, dozing off again, was laid across the worn leather seat of the truck, clutching her mother's sleeve. The woman stared out the window, arms folded, jaw tight. Eli didn't push. He knew when a person needed space. Hell, he'd lived half his life inside one. At a red light near the edge of town, he finally asked, "Got a name?" "Lena," she said. "Sergeant Lena Monroe, U.S. Army, discharged." "Eli Brooks," he said. "I do pavement." "And pancakes." She glanced at him, eyebrows raised. "I fix roads by day, flip breakfast for my kid by morning." Something in her expression softened, not much, but enough to tell him that the name meant something. Maybe it was the plainness of it. Maybe it was the quiet. "I'm not staying," she said after a moment. "I didn't ask you to. Just one night." That's what the last thunderstorm said. It stayed 3. She snorted again, a half laugh, then looked out the window, and her voice dropped. "I don't do handouts." Eli nodded slowly, eyes on the road. "Good. I don't give them." They passed the church, the diner, the old hardware store with the rusting wind chime. It was a town time had skipped, but kindness had stayed behind. Eli pulled into his gravel driveway, a modest white house with peeling paint and a sloping porch. A tire swing moved lazily in the breeze. "You can stay in the garage out back," he said, shifting into park. "It's clean, has a cot, a fan. Not much else." "That's more than we had yesterday," Lena murmured, almost too soft to hear. He got out and opened her door gently, lifting Emma into his arms without asking. She didn't stir. "She's light," he said. "She's 6, but she's carried more than most grown men." Eli looked at Lena for a long beat. Then, "Well, maybe it's time somebody else carried her for a while." That stopped her, dead in her tracks. She opened her mouth, closed it, then followed him through the tall grass toward the garage, her boot silent in the dust. That night, Eli sat on the porch, a cup of black coffee in hand, staring into the dark. Behind him, a woman who didn't believe in trust slept on a cot in his garage. A little girl who hadn't smiled in weeks was wrapped in a borrowed blanket. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight the long road had brought someone to his door, and somehow that felt like the beginning of something worth believing in again. The garage smelled like cedar and machine oil, not unpleasant, just lived in. Eli had cleared off the old workbench, tucked a cot into the corner with fresh sheets, and brought in a standing fan. It hummed quietly as Lena laid Emma down, brushing a damp curl from her daughter's forehead. Emma didn't stir. "She's out cold," Lena whispered. "She needed it," Eli said from the doorway, arms crossed loosely. Lena straightened her frame, silhouetted by the dim light bulb swinging overhead. She wore the same jacket, sleeves rolled up to her elbows, and boots still on. Her eyes tracked everything in the room: tools, ladder, exit, windows, the way a soldier reads a battlefield. "This is fine. We'll be gone by morning." Eli nodded. "You can be. No one's locking the door." She paused. "You do this often? Pick up strangers off benches?" "No," he said. "Just the ones who look like they haven't been looked at in a long time." She held his gaze for a beat too long, then sat on the edge of the cot, back straight, tension still wired through her spine like barbed wire. "I don't sleep easy," she muttered. "Don't expect me to." "I don't expect anything," Eli said, "except that you'll be hungry." He dropped a folded note and a house key on the small folding table by the door. "Kitchen's through the back porch. Pancakes at 7. Don't knock." Then he was gone. The night was quiet. Arkansas quiet. No traffic, just crickets, and the occasional hum of a distant train. Lena lay with her eyes open, counting the seconds between fan rotations. Emma, beside her now on the cot, slept with one hand curled around her mother's wrist like a lifeline. One night. Just one night. That's what she'd promised herself. Eli stood at the kitchen stove at 6:45 a.m., flipping pancakes with practiced rhythm. His daughter Maya, 11, and sharp as a tack, sat at the counter in her pajamas, feet swinging off the stool. "She's still here?" Maya asked, peering out the window. "Looks like it," Eli said without looking up. "What's her name again?" "Lena." "Her daughter's Emma." Maya bit her lip, thoughtful. "She a soldier?" "Was. She looks sad. She looks like someone who's seen things." Eli said, plating the pancakes. "Like you." He paused just a second too long, then smiled faintly. "Yeah. Maybe." Lena appeared on the porch a few minutes later, Emma trailing behind her in one of Maya's old t-shirts and a pair of borrowed leggings. Her hair had been brushed roughly, but it was an improvement. "You said 7, Lena said, hovering near the screen door. "I meant it," Eli said. "Coffee's fresh, syrup's warm." She stepped inside slowly, eyes adjusting to the light. Maya offered a tentative smile. "I'm Maya," she said. Emma, the little girl replied, clutching her mother's hand. We don't usually eat pancakes. Well, Maya said, today's your lucky day. Lena took a seat, stiff, uncertain, but as the first bite hit her tongue, her shoulders dropped half an inch. These are ridiculous, she muttered. Eli sipped his coffee. I have a reputation to uphold. Emma giggled, mouthful of syrup. It was the first real sound from her since she arrived, the kind that wasn't fear or fatigue. After breakfast, Eli washed the dishes. Lena stood nearby, awkward. I'll clean the garage before we go, she said. No rush, I said one night. He turned off the tap and looked at her. You did. She waited for him to argue, to push, but he didn't. That made her more uneasy than any resistance might have. She stared at the floor. This isn't normal. People don't do this. I don't do normal, Eli said. Normal hasn't worked out too well for me. Silence settled between them. She didn't ask what he meant, and he didn't offer. Late that afternoon, Lena stood near the front gate, with her duffel bag slung over one shoulder. Emma clutched her stuffed animal and looked up at her mother, uncertain. You sure? Eli asked, standing a few feet away. One night, Lena repeated, but her voice faltered. She looked at Maya on the porch, waving goodbye. Looked at Emma, pale, thin, too quiet for a child her age. Looked back at the house, old, yes, but solid. Safe. And for just a second, her fingers loosened on the strap of the duffel. She can stay, Eli said gently. Just a few days, with Maya, if you need to figure things out. Lena's jaw clenched. I don't leave my daughter. Eli didn't back off, didn't say you had to. Emma tugged her sleeve. Mama, my stomach still hurts. Can we stay another night just for pancakes? Lena blinked. The choice wasn't hard, but saying yes, that felt like betrayal of her pride, of her past, of the woman who'd sworn never to need anyone again. But then she looked into her daughter's eyes. Yes, she whispered. Just one more night. Eli nodded once. We'll see you at breakfast. As they walked back toward the house, Lena glanced sideways at him and said, half joking, half wounded, You're either the kindest man I've ever met, or the loneliest. Eli didn't smile, just said quietly, Sometimes those two things look a lot alike, and behind them, the long road stood still, waiting to see who'd take the next step. The morning air was cooler than expected, rare for late June. A mist clung to the grass, softening the edges of the world. Lena stood at the kitchen sink, mug of black coffee in hand, eyes tracking the two girls through the window as they drew chalk on the driveway. Emma giggled. Maya, with sleeves rolled high, was showing her how to draw a horse, though it looked more like a dog with ambition. They get along, Eli said behind her, setting down a box of nails on the counter. Lena didn't turn. Emma hasn't laughed like that in a while. She should. She shouldn't have to. Lena said quieter now. Not after. Everything. Eli leaned against the wall, arms folded. Kids are built to heal fast. It's us adults who make it complicated. She sipped her coffee, letting the silence stretch. It wasn't awkward, just wide enough for thoughts to echo. There was something about Eli Brooks that made silence feel earned, not forced. He didn't fill the space with noise, didn't pry. He just existed in it, solid and calm, like the kind of person you could sit next to for an hour and say nothing, and still feel heard. By noon, Lena had swept out the garage, folded their few clothes, and organized Emma's scattered things. Not because she planned to leave, not yet, but because the habit of order was hard to break. Old training dies hard. Eli worked outside on the back deck, replacing rotted planks. The rhythmic thump of his hammer matched her thoughts, steady, unspoken. Lena sat on the steps of the porch, watching him. You live here long? She asked. Bought it 10 years ago, he said. right after Maya was born. What about her mom? Eli paused mid-swing, then went back to hammering. Gone 5 years now. Car accident. I'm sorry. He shrugged. She loved this place. Said it smelled like honeysuckle and home. Lena didn't respond. She knew that kind of loss, the kind you learn to carry like a backpack full of bricks. You don't cry every day, but you never quite put it down either. That evening the 4 of them sat on the porch, with paper plates of fried chicken and corn salad. Emma leaned against Maya, cheeks flushed from sun and sugar. Lena chewed slowly, eyes drifting between the girls and the setting sun. It should have felt temporary, like a borrowed moment. But it didn't. It felt terrifyingly normal. You always cook like this, Lena asked. Only on days ending in I, Eli said dryly. Maya smirked. He does grilled cheese on weekends. Thinks that's gourmet. I add pickles. It's elevated, Eli replied. Lena chuckled before she could stop herself. Emma looked up. Mama, are we going to leave soon? The laughter died. Lena set her plate down. Not yet, baby. Why? Lena hesitated. Because sometimes the road has to wait. That night the girls fell asleep curled up in a blanket fort in the living room. Lena stood in the hallway, arms crossed, as Eli emerged from the kitchen with 2 mugs of tea. No coffee at night, he said. That's the one rule. Lena took the mug. You strike me as a man of very few rules. Maybe. But I keep the ones I make. They sat on the porch again, sipping in silence. Crickets buzzed in the distance. A dog barked 3 houses over. The town was still, the kind of stillness Lena didn't trust yet. You don't ask many questions, she finally said. Only when I want answers. Well, what do you want now? Eli looked at her steady. I want to know what keeps you awake at night. Lena's breath caught. She stared ahead. The old oak tree swayed in the wind. I can't stop hearing it, she said. Voice barely above a whisper. The radio crackling. The sound of steel hitting steel. The explosion. Then silence. The kind that doesn't end. Eli didn't flinch. I hear different things. But I know that silence. She turned to him, her defenses slipping. I lost people. Good ones. And then they turned around and blamed me. Wrote me up. Labeled me careless. Unfit. Discharged. Just like that. He said nothing, but his gaze stayed on her. Not pitying. Not judging. Lena shook her head. I don't trust this place. This quiet. Feels like a trap. It's not, Eli said. But I get it. When life hits you too many times, even peace feels suspicious. Lena's eyes glistened in the moonlight. I don't know how to let my guard down. I don't know if I want to. You don't have to, he said. But when you're ready, it'll still be here. She looked at him, then really looked. You say that like someone who's waited a long time. I have, Eli said, his voice low. But I stopped waiting for the right person. Started waiting for the real one. Lena stared at him, and in that moment, porch light flickering above them, 2 sleeping girls in the next room, the night holding its breath, something shifted. Not a promise, but the first crack in a wall built too high for too long. Inside, Emma stirred in her sleep. Maya placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and whispered, It's okay. You're safe here. And somewhere outside, a storm passed by, but it didn't stop. This time, it simply moved on. The next morning arrived wrapped in gold sunlight spilling over the fields, catching on dew-speckled grass, and the screen door that creaked open as Lena stepped onto the porch. She held a mug of coffee, black as ever, but her shoulders seemed lighter. Maybe it was sleep. Maybe it was the smell of fried bacon drifting from the kitchen. Eli stood at the grill flipping eggs in a skillet like it was second nature. Maya buzzed around, setting the table, humming an old Dolly Parton tune under her breath. Smells like a diner in here, Lena said, stepping inside. Eli glanced over his shoulder. We take breakfast seriously. You take everything seriously. Just food, he deadpanned. She smiled. Not a grin. Not a smirk. But a real quiet smile, the kind you give when something warms you unexpectedly. After breakfast, Maya threw out the idea like it was nothing. There's a pie festival in Miller's Ridge today, only 40 minutes up the road. Lena raised an eyebrow. A pie festival? Pies, crafts, music, old people dancing badly. It's amazing, Maya grinned. Please, can we go? Eli looked at Lena. Might do you both some good. I don't do crowds, Lena said automatically. Maya pouted dramatically. But it's outside. No buildings, just sunshine and crust. Emma tugged Lena's sleeve. I've never been to a festival, Mama. Lena glanced between them, the pleading eyes of her daughter, the hopeful smile of a girl who'd opened her heart with effortless trust, and Eli quietly waiting without pressure. She sighed. Fine. 1 pie. That's it. Miller's Ridge was one of those towns that still had hand-painted signs and soda in glass bottles. Flags flapped in the wind, and folding tables stretched down Main Street, covered in everything from pecan pie to handmade soap. Lena stepped out of the truck and froze. Music blared softly from a speaker on the lamppost. People were laughing, chatting, waving. Children ran barefoot. Veterans in ball caps traded stories on benches. And suddenly her breath caught. Eli noticed. You okay? She nodded too quickly. Yeah, just a lawn. You want to wait in the truck? Lena exhaled slowly. No, I want to try. He didn't touch her, didn't nudge, just walked beside her quietly like a shadow that wouldn't leave. The girls ran ahead to the crafts table. Lena wandered toward a small booth with quilts and old photo frames. Eli bought lemonade. She picked at a corner of one, tracing the stitching. My grandma made quilts like this, she murmured. Eli handed her a drink. Ever make one yourself? She shook her head. Didn't stay in one place long enough. Even before the army, we moved constantly. Dad was stationed all over. He sipped his lemonade. That's where the boots come from. She looked down at them. The old leather was worn but still sturdy. They were his, she said. I wore 'em out of spite at first. Got teased in basic. But I kept them. Why, she shrugged. They fit. And they remind me I came from somewhere. A soft pause passed between them. People bustled around them, children laughing, a band tuning guitars. But for a moment the world was just two people in the stillness of memory. Later, they stood in front of the pie contest booth. Maya was begging Eli to try the blackberry bourbon slice. You're too young for bourbon. He chuckled. It's in the glaze, she argued. Emma bounced next to her. I want peach. Lena watched, arms crossed, amused. A woman in a gingham apron offered her a sample. She accepted out of politeness, but the second the flaky crust hit her tongue, she blinked. This is insane, she muttered. Eli grinned. See sunshine and crust. She rolled her eyes. You're never going to let me live that down. Nope. As the afternoon wore on, the girls made candles and painted rocks. Lena stood beside Eli watching them, her arms no longer crossed her shoulders, relaxed. This feels dangerous, he offered. She smiled faintly. No, that's what scares me. Eli didn't answer right away. He just leaned against the fence, his voice low. You're allowed to feel joy, Lena, even if it's fleeting. Especially if it is. She turned to him. What if I mess it up? You will, he said without hesitation. We all do. That's not the point. The point is, you keep showing up anyway. The words sank in, not like a jolt, more like rain on dry ground. Driving home, the girls fell asleep in the back seat, sugar and sunshine finally weighing them down. Lena sat beside Eli, one boot up on the dash. They're good kids, she said. They are. And you're not what I expected. He glanced sideways. What did you expect? A man who takes in strangers and flips pancakes for lost women. He laughed softly. I've been called worse. She looked at him, the light from the dashboard painting him in shadows. I don't know what this is yet, she admitted. But it's more than I thought I'd feel again. Eli didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Because sometimes the long road wasn't just asphalt and direction. Sometimes it was a quiet truck cab after a day of pie and possibility. And sometimes, just sometimes, that was enough to believe in the road ahead. The midday sun hit harder than it had all week. Cicadas buzzed like tiny machines in the trees as Eli tightened the last bolt on his flatbed trailer. Lena stood nearby, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, her boots dusty from the short walk through the field behind the house. You sure about this? She asked, squinting against the light. Eli straightened up, wiping grease from his fingers onto a rag. We're just hauling some timber to the next county. Should be a smooth ride. And Maya said Emma wanted to see the river. Lena hesitated, eyeing the truck with uncertainty, not because of the truck, but because of what this little trip meant. Another step. Another night. Another reason to stay longer than planned. Emma's excited, she admitted. Packed snacks and everything. You'd think we were going cross-country. Eli grinned. Well, to a kid an hour down the road with a picnic basket might as well be cross-country. She smirked. I guess that makes us the caravan of misfits. Eli climbed into the driver's seat and leaned across to open her door from inside. Then climb aboard, Sergeant. We're rolling out. The girls sang along to old country songs in the back seat, the windows down, and their hair whipping in the wind. Emma held a juice box like a microphone. Maya kept changing the lyrics to make her laugh. Lena up front sat with one hand resting on the open window, the other fidgeting with the frayed seam of her jeans. I forgot what this feels like, she said after a while. What's that? Eli asked, glancing over. Movement. But not because we're running. Just going. Somewhere. Without fear. He nodded slowly. Funny how healing doesn't always look like therapy or some grand epiphany. Sometimes it's just a good song and a dirt road. She gave a small laugh, and kids who can't hold a tune. Hey, he said with mock offense, that's half the charm. They reached the river bend just after 1. A lazy stretch of water snaked between 2 hills, shaded by tall elms and cottonwoods. It was quiet, the kind of place locals kept to themselves. The girls ran ahead with sandwiches and towels, while Eli and Lena set up camp under an old oak. He spread out a worn blanket while she watched the water arms folded loosely. You always find these places, she asked. Some people collect coins, he said. I collect stillness. Lena chuckled. Well, you're rich today. They sat in silence for a while, the rustling trees and distant splashes filling the space. Lena pulled off her boots and dug her toes into the cool grass. I hated boots for a while, she said suddenly. After I left the army, I swore I'd never wear 'em again. Burned my first pair. Eli turned to her, saying nothing. But then I remembered my father's. Worn, thin, scuffed to hell. He called them his truth-tellers. Said, you can fake a smile, fake words. But boots. They tell on you. How far you've walked. What you've carried. Where you broke. Eli looked at her boots beside the blanket. Then yours must have a hell of a story. They do, she said quietly. But I've kept most of it to myself. Eli reached into the cooler for 2 sodas, handed one to her without comment. She took it with a small nod. What if I told you, she said slowly, that the worst thing I ever did was take the blame for something I didn't do? Eli didn't blink. I'd say you're either incredibly loyal or incredibly afraid. She stared at the water. Both. My CO messed up, left an entire shipment unsecured. The base got hit. We lost 2 soldiers. I was in charge of inventory, so they made me the scapegoat. Did you fight it? She exhaled. I wanted to. But I knew if the truth came out he'd lose his pension, his family. He was a father of 4. "And what about your daughter?" Eli asked softly. "Did she deserve to lose hers?" That landed like a stone. Lena's eyes welled. She wiped them fast. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she whispered. "But it left me with nothing. No record, no benefits, no support. Just shame." "Not shame," Eli said. "Sacrifice." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "But you forgot something, Lena. Even heroes need a place to land. You can't fly forever." She looked at him, eyes fierce with the pain of too many silent years. "You think I'm a hero. I think you're the strongest damn person I've met," he said. "And I've poured concrete in July." That broke her. Not into sobs, but a laugh, jagged and wet and real. She covered her mouth, embarrassed. Eli didn't say a word, just handed her a napkin and looked out over the river like it had all the answers. They didn't. On the drive back, the girls were asleep again, tangled together in the back seat like puppies in a sunbeam. Lena sat beside Eli, arms crossed, but the tension was gone. Instead, there was stillness. Not the dangerous kind, the healing kind. "Thanks for today," she said. "Sure." "No." She pressed. "I mean it. For not asking too much. For not prying. For just driving." "You ever notice," Eli said, "how some of the best conversations happen on the road?" She nodded. "Maybe it's 'cause you don't have to look anyone in the eye." He smiled just a little. "You can talk to me, Lena," he said. "But if you can't, that's okay too. I'll just keep driving." She looked at him quiet for a long time. "Then keep driving, Eli Brooks." "I will," he said. "As long as you're in the seat beside me." Outside, the sun dipped low behind the hills, and for once, Lena didn't watch the rearview mirror. She watched the road ahead. It rained that night. Not a storm, just a slow, steady drizzle that soaked the roof and drummed a rhythm soft enough to lull even restless minds to sleep. But Lena wasn't sleeping. She sat at the workbench in the garage, now more of a guest room than a tool shed, with the single overhead bulb casting long shadows on the cement floor. Emma slept on the cot behind her, curled into herself, fingers loosely grasping the edge of a blanket that smelled faintly of lavender and home. Lena's hands hovered over an old envelope, yellowed creased edges, softened from too much touching, too many times, almost mailed. She opened it slowly, as if the air might tear it apart. Inside was a letter, neatly folded, written in her hand, but with a sharpness and precision she barely recognized now. The tone was military. The message personal. "To whom it may concern, I accept full responsibility for the supply breach on March 17th. I recognize that protocol was not followed under my supervision. Although the fault may be shared among multiple parties, I take full accountability. The decision to not report the vulnerability sooner was mine. I acted on instinct, not on regulation. I understand this may result in disciplinary action, and I am prepared to accept all consequences." There was no signature, just a name, typed at the bottom, Lena Monroe Sergeant. But the letter had never been sent, because even after all the guilt, all the shame, there had been a tiny, stubborn part of her that believed she deserved better than silence in return for silence. And so she'd kept it, not out of hope, but out of defiance. She folded it again, tucked it into her duffel bag, and zipped it shut. The next morning, Eli noticed something was off. Lena was quieter than usual, not cold, just pulled inward, like someone listening to a storm only she could hear. She helped Maya pack lunches for school, without a word of complaint, braided Emma's hair, even though she claimed not to know how, and offered to wash the dishes after breakfast. But Eli could see it, the detachment, the mental distance. He didn't press. He never did. Instead, he stepped out to the shed behind the house to look for a spare water hose. That's when he saw it. The duffel was unzipped. He didn't mean to look, just meant to zip it back out of instinct, but the letter slipped loose and fluttered to the ground. He stared at it, hesitating. But then his fingers picked it up, and before he could stop himself, his eyes scanned the words. Lena found him 15 minutes later sitting on the porch swing, the letter folded neatly on his lap untouched, except for the truth, now carved into his silence. She froze. Her voice came out rough. "You read it." Eli looked up, eyes steady. "I did." Her jaw clenched. "You had no right." "I know." She stood there, fists balled, fury and shame simmering just beneath her skin. "So, what now? You want me gone?" He shook his head slowly. "No." Lena laughed bitterly. "You think I'm some noble martyr now? Is that it?" Poor Sergeant Monroe took the fall for the big guy. "What a saint." "That's not what I think." "Then what?" Eli leaned forward, elbows on knees, voice calm. "I think you've been carrying something too heavy for too long. I think you made a choice you've regretted every day since, and I think you've mistaken survival for punishment." She blinked. "That letter wasn't just a confession. It was a declaration of who you are, someone who would rather be ruined than let someone else suffer." She swallowed hard. "I didn't do it for glory. I know. I did it because he had 4 kids. Because he cried when he realized what he'd done. Because I didn't want to be the reason his family starved." "And who's been feeding yours since?" Eli asked gently. Lena's breath hitched. He didn't fill the silence. He just let it exist wide and true. That night, after Emma had fallen asleep and the house had gone still, Lena stepped quietly into the kitchen, where Eli sat, nursing a cup of decaf legs stretched out under the table. She pulled out a chair and sat across from him. "No one's ever read that letter," she said. "Not even me, after I wrote it." He nodded. "I know. I almost mailed it 12 times. But something always stopped me." "What was it?" She shrugged. "Fear. Pride. Maybe the truth. Maybe I wanted to suffer. Maybe I thought that if I hurt long enough it'd make up for it." Eli watched her closely. "That's not how redemption works." She gave him a tired look. "You think I deserve redemption, I think we all do. But we have to accept it. I don't know if I can." Eli leaned forward, voice low, firm. "Then let me carry it for a while. Not the guilt, just the story. So you're not the only one who knows it happened." Lena looked at him like he'd offered her oxygen in a burning room. For a long moment she didn't speak. Then she reached into her jacket pocket and slid the letter across the table. "Keep it," she whispered. "Just don't let it define me." "I won't," Eli said, resting his hand lightly over the paper. "But it explains a lot about the kind of woman who showed up at that bench." She looked away, jaw tight with emotion. "You know," she said quietly, "people always talk about how strong I am, how tough I was in the field. But no one ever said I was good." Eli shook his head. "That's because they were looking at your uniform, not your boots." She frowned. "My boots. They tell the truth, remember." Her eyes softened, then shimmered. And when she laughed, barely a breath of it, it was the sound of something loosening inside her chest. Outside the rain had stopped. But the soil was soft now. Ready. And for the first time in years, Lena Monroe felt something take root. The clouds rolled in slow and heavy that Friday morning, bruised purple things that clung low to the hills, like the sky was holding its breath. The radio warned of thunderstorms, maybe even tornadoes. Arkansas had seen its share of wild weather, and today folks were spooked early. But at Eli's house, life carried on in quiet defiance. Maya and Emma sat at the kitchen table coloring, as if the world weren't darkening by the minute. Lena stood by the window, arms crossed, tracking the storm's movement on Eli's old radar app like it owed her answers. I don't like this, she muttered. It's just wind and water, Eli said, sipping coffee. Lena shot him a look, spoken like someone who's never lost everything in a flood. Eli didn't argue. He just offered her a second cup, which she took with a grudging nod. By noon the sky was nearly black. Leaves swirled up in sudden gusts, and the trees bent at odd angles. The porch creaked under invisible pressure. Local schools closed early. Sirens tested their lungs. The air felt thick, like something waiting to break. Emma clung to her mother's hand. Are we going to be okay? Lena knelt beside her, brushing hair from her daughter's face. We'll be fine, baby. I've got you. Maya stood behind them with a flashlight. We have a storm kit. My dad's kind of a preparedness nut. Appreciate the endorsement, Eli said wryly. He motioned everyone toward the hallway closet. It was a snug space, lined with canned goods, batteries, and a weather radio. Eli handed out pillows and bottled water without ceremony. They waited. The hours crawled. The wind howled, rattled the windows, then died down again. Rain splattered against the roof, but never roared. No thunder. No lightning. Just tension. At some point, Lena sat cross-legged on the floor, Emma curled in her lap. Maya leaned against Eli, her eyes half closed. Looks like it's skirting west, Eli said, checking his phone. We might get lucky. Lena said nothing. Her eyes were locked on a fixed point in the dark. Not fear, exactly, but memory. She wasn't in the closet anymore. She was somewhere far away. Maybe in uniform. Maybe crouched behind a barricade. Maybe with someone dying beside her and no way to help. Eli saw it. The quiet spiral, the hands clenched too tight. You with me? He asked softly. Lena blinked and turned her head toward him. Yeah, she said after a moment. I'm here. By late afternoon the wind eased. The rain slowed to a patter. Birds returned. Light filtered back through the clouds, reluctant, but real. They stepped outside like survivors of something that never quite arrived. Maya ran barefoot across the yard, laughing at nothing. Emma chased her, splashing in shallow puddles, shrieking with joy. The storm had passed. Lena stood on the porch, eyes lifted to the sky, like she still didn't believe it. Sometimes, Eli said, joining her, it's the storms that don't come that teach you the most. She looked at him. Like what? Like how maybe? You deserve a break. Lena exhaled a laugh, soft and credulous. I wouldn't even know what that looks like. This, he said, nodding at the yard, the girls, the sun breaking through. This is what it looks like. That night, Eli made dinner like it was a holiday. Grilled chicken, buttered corn, warm biscuits. They ate outside under strings of porch lights, the world washed clean and shining. Emma curled against Lena's side, full and drowsy. Maya sat cross-legged on a lawn chair, retelling the great closet adventure like it was a scene from a movie. Eli leaned back, arms behind his head, watching it all unfold. Lena turned to him. You didn't even flinch today. I've lived through worse storms. Yeah, she said. Quietly, me too. They shared a look, not a charged one. Not romantic. Just understanding. Deep, steady. A silent agreement between two people who had stood in the rubble before and chose to build something anyway. Later, after the girls were asleep and the dishes were done, Lena lingered at the porch railing, tracing the edge of her mug with her thumb. I didn't expect to stay this long, she said. Eli didn't look surprised. Didn't expect you to either. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for this to all blow up in my face. It didn't. No, she admitted. It didn't. A pause. You know the scariest part, she asked. What? It's not the storms I'm afraid of. It's what happens when they pass, when it's quiet again. Eli nodded slowly. Because the quiet makes you feel everything you'd been out running. Exactly. They stood like that for a while side by side, not touching the air filled with crickets and possibility. "I don't know what's next," she said. "You don't have to," Eli replied. "Just be here now. That's enough." Lena looked out at the yard where the moonlight touched everything softly. "Maybe it is," she whispered. "Maybe for the first time. It actually is." In the distance, thunder rolled faintly, a memory, nothing more. And inside Lena Monroe's chest, something loosened. Not because she had found peace, but because for the first time in years, peace had found her. The day began like any other. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, the smell of toast in the air, the distant laughter of children tumbling through the backyard. Eli stood at the sink, rinsing out a coffee mug, his mind half on a work order. He needed to finish half on the memory of Lena's laugh from the night before. It had come unexpectedly low, worn around the edges, like a melody she hadn't sung in years. But it had been real, and something in him had caught on it, like a hook in the chest. He dried his hands, glanced toward the hallway, and frowned. The garage door was cracked open. Too quiet. Maya sat at the breakfast table drawing with a blue marker. "Emma's not here," she said without looking up. "Neither is Lena." Eli froze. He walked quickly through the house, past the living room, down the porch steps, out to the driveway. Empty. The duffel bag was gone. So were the boots by the door. So was the letter he'd left for her in the kitchen, still sealed, unopened. He stood for a long moment, jaw tightening, heart settling into that familiar old rhythm of loss. She was gone. Just like that, Lena walked fast, shoulders squared, head down, Emma's small hand clasped in hers. The morning mist clung to her hair. She didn't look back. They cut across the back road behind Eli's property, down past the old train tracks, where the county bus stopped twice a week. She'd memorized the schedule. A half-mile more, and she'd be gone before anyone knew. "Where are we going, Mama?" Emma asked, voice groggy. "Just a little trip," Lena said. "Is Mr. Eli coming, too?" Lena's throat tightened. "No, baby. Just us." Emma didn't say anything after that, but her steps slowed. Back at the house, Eli stood on the back porch, staring out at the swing, swaying in the breeze. Maya joined him, arms crossed. "She left," she said flatly. "Looks that way." Without saying goodbye, he didn't answer. "Couldn't." "She said she wouldn't leave," Maya whispered. "She told me." Eli turned to her, his voice soft. "Sometimes people don't know what they'll do until the moment comes." Maya blinked hard. "Do you think she's scared?" "I think she's tired," Eli said. "And maybe she doesn't believe she deserves to stay." Maya frowned. "That's dumb." He gave a hollow smile. "Yeah, it is." The bus wheezed as it pulled up brakes, squealing. Lena handed the driver a crumpled bill and guided Emma up the steps. They sat near the back. Emma pressed her forehead to the window, watching the trees blur past. "Mama," she said after a while, "do you miss Maya?" Lena closed her eyes. "Yeah," she said. "I do." "Do you miss Mr. Eli?" Lena didn't answer, because the answer was too big for words. She didn't know where she was going. Not really. Some vague idea of heading south, maybe Louisiana. Somewhere with jobs and warm weather. Somewhere no one knew her name or her mistakes. But every town looked like the last. Every road the same dust. By noon they stopped in a roadside diner, the kind with peeling vinyl booths and a jukebox that hadn't worked since Clinton was president. Lena ordered grilled cheese for Emma and nothing for herself. She stared at the door. She didn't know what she was waiting for. But she was waiting, all the same. Back in town, Eli pulled the truck into the gas station, filled the tank, and stood leaning against the side, hands in his pockets. "She doesn't have a plan," he said aloud to no one. He knew that look, the one people wore when they were running without a destination, just an urgency to escape whatever kindness might undo them. He could let her go. He'd done it before. But something about Lena Monroe felt different. Not fragile, never that, but fraying, like a flag too long in the wind. He didn't know if chasing her would change anything, but he knew what silence would feel like if he didn't try. He climbed into the truck and turned the key. Lena watched Emma play with the sugar packets on the diner table. The waitress refilled their water, offered a tired smile. Outside, a big rig passed, shaking the windows. Her stomach churned. It wasn't fear. It was regret. And underneath it, something sharper, grief. She'd thought leaving would be clean. Simple. But all she could think about was the way Eli had handed her coffee every morning without asking how she took it. The way Maya laughed like she trusted the world. The way the porch light always stayed on like someone was waiting. A hand slipped into hers. Emma looked up. "Can we go home now?" Lena's eyes filled. She whispered, "I don't know if we can." Emma leaned close, lips near her ear. "I think Mr. Eli would still let us." Outside, a familiar sound pulled Lena's eyes to the window. A truck. His truck. Dusty, steady, slow as always. It pulled into the gravel lot. Parked. And Eli stepped out like it was just another stop on a long day, not a rescue, not a declaration, just him. He didn't run. Didn't rush. He walked to the window, hands loose at his sides, and looked at her. She stood slowly, her breath shallow. He didn't speak. She didn't either. The silence held everything. And then Emma ran out the door, straight into Eli's arms. They stood in the parking lot for a long while, no words exchanged. Lena stared at him, eyes rimmed red. "I shouldn't have left," she said, finally. Eli nodded. "But you did. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought..." She trailed off. He stepped closer. "You don't have to explain," he said. "Just get in the truck." She let out a breath that shook her whole body. "Are you sure?" Eli gave her the smallest smile. "I left the porch light on. That broke her." She walked toward him, slow but certain. And when he opened the passenger door, she climbed in, boots and all, and didn't look back. The highway stretched like a ribbon of silence between them. Dust rose behind Eli's truck, curling into the late afternoon air, as Lena sat in the passenger seat, with Emma asleep across her lap. Her boots were muddy, her heart heavier. She'd barely spoken since they left the diner. Eli didn't press. He kept his eyes on the road, one hand resting easy on the steering wheel, the other fiddling occasionally with the radio dial. A classic country station hummed through the speakers, old songs about home and heartbreak. They drove like that for miles. Finally, Lena broke the quiet. "You really drove all that way to find me?" Eli's eyes stayed forward. Didn't have anything better to do. She huffed. "That's a terrible reason. It's honest." She glanced down at Emma, brushing a lock of hair from her daughter's forehead. "I thought leaving would keep her from getting attached. From getting hurt." "Didn't work," Eli said softly. "No," Lena admitted. "It didn't." They passed the edge of town fields, giving way to rusted barns and crooked mailboxes. The sun dipped lower, burning orange across the hills. "I was headed to Texas," Lena murmured. "My father's buried there. I hadn't been back since the funeral." Eli nodded. "You still want to go?" She looked out the window. "Yeah. I think I need to." He didn't ask why. He just took the next left. They drove through the evening, the truck humming beneath them like a steady heartbeat. Emma woke near dusk, blinking sleepily. "Are we home?" she asked. "Not yet, sweetheart," Lena said, kissing her temple. "But we're going somewhere important." Emma yawned and settled back into her mother's arms without a word. By nightfall, they reached the little cemetery off a county road outside Amarillo. There was no gate, no marble, just plain wooden crosses and a few cracked headstones under the open sky. Lena stepped out slowly, boots crunching over dry grass. She led Emma by the hand. Eli stayed by the truck, giving her space. She knelt by the grave marked Raymond Monroe, Staff Sergeant, U.S. Army, 1957-2009. "I'm sorry it took me so long," she whispered. Emma stood beside her quietly, her small fingers finding her mother's hand. Lena stared at the marker for a long time. "My dad wasn't perfect," she said aloud. "But he believed in showing up, even when he was tired. Even when it hurt." She looked back toward the truck. "And I haven't been doing that lately." She swallowed hard. "I let fear make my choices." Again, her voice cracked. "I wanted to protect Emma, but really, I just didn't believe I was allowed to have anything good." Emma leaned close. "You have me." Lena laughed, broken and beautiful. "Yeah, I do." Back at the truck, Eli was waiting on the hood, arms crossed, loosely moonlight casting soft shadows across his face. He didn't speak when she returned. Just opened the passenger door again, same as before. Lena paused. "I left because I didn't think I was enough." Eli met her eyes. "And now I don't know what I am," she said. "But I know what I want." A long silence. "Then I want to come home, Eli, if the offer still stands." He moved aside gently, his voice low. "It's always stood, Lena. You just needed to walk toward it." They stayed the night at a roadside motel. 2 twin beds, 1 flickering lamp, and a rattling AC unit that barely kept up. Emma fell asleep, instantly snuggled deep under a quilt with cartoon stars. Lena sat at the edge of her bed, facing Eli. "I feel like I've done everything backwards," she said. Eli leaned back in the creaky armchair. "Sometimes the long road's the right one. Just takes longer to figure it out." She studied him. "Why didn't you give up on me?" He met her gaze. "Because you were never lost, Lena. You just needed someone to believe the road you were on could still lead home." A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it fast. "I don't cry," she muttered. "Neither do I," he said. Then, after a beat, "But maybe we both should." The next morning the world was gold. Again sunlight streaming through the motel blinds, the smell of stale coffee, and possibility in the air. Lena packed quietly while Emma colored on the motel notepad. She looked at herself in the mirror for a long time. Same face, same eyes, but softer now. Worn, yes, but not empty. Eli loaded the bags into the truck. Lena slid into the passenger seat and looked over at him. "We still have a long road ahead." Eli started the engine. "Good thing I brought snacks." Lena smiled. It was the first time it didn't feel like pretending. As the truck rumbled back toward the only place that had ever felt like more than a stop, Lena turned her head and watched the fields roll past the sky, wide and waiting. For the first time in years, the road didn't feel like an escape. It felt like a return. Home wasn't behind them. Home was something they were building mile by mile, word by word, one hard-earned truth at a time. The porch light was still on. It had been left that way. As promised, glowing faint and steady against the early evening hush, a silent sentinel on the edge of a quiet life. When Eli pulled the truck into the gravel drive, Lena stared at the house as if it had grown roots in her absence. The swing still creaked in the breeze. The curtain still swayed gently in the living room window. But everything felt different. Not because it had changed, because she had. Emma unbuckled herself and leapt from the truck before the engine even stopped racing toward Maya's voice as it called from the backyard. Their laughter rose like music. Familiar welcome right. Lena didn't move. Eli came around to her door, opened it gently. "You sure?" he asked. "No," she said honestly. "But I'm here." He offered his hand. She took it. Inside the house was just as she remembered, clean, warm, faintly smelling of wood polish and cinnamon. On the kitchen table sat a folded note in Maya's handwriting. "Welcome home, Emma. And maybe your mom, too." Underneath was a badly drawn cartoon of Lena in a superhero cape. Lena stared at it, half laughing, half joking. "I told her you'd be back," Eli said, pulling out a chair. Lena didn't sit. Instead, she wandered to the hallway where her boots still rested by the door. But next to them, a new pair. Same size, same style, but unworn, untouched. "Those yours?" she asked, pointing. Eli shook his head. "Nope. They're yours. Got 'em a while back. Thought you might want a fresh start when you were ready." She looked down at her old ones, scarred, battered, tired from years of marching. Then at the new ones, clean, firm, waiting. "I don't know if I deserve them," she said quietly. Eli stepped behind her, not too close. "It's not about deserving. It's about choosing to step into something new." Lena bent down, slowly, unlaced her old boots and set them aside. She held the new ones for a moment, fingers tracing the edges, before slipping them on. They fit. Not perfectly. Not yet. But enough. That night they all sat out on the back porch, wrapped in old quilts, sipping hot cocoa, while cicadas sang their songs and the stars peeked out shyly between the trees. Emma curled up in Lena's lap. Maya laid her head against Eli's shoulder, their silhouettes quiet and still beneath the hanging lights. No one said much. They didn't have to. Sometimes the presence of people who chose to stay was loud enough. Later, after the girls were tucked in and the house had fallen into its nightly hush, Lena stood in the doorway of the kitchen, watching Eli dry dishes at the sink. "You always clean like this?" she asked. He smiled without turning. "Only when I'm nervous." She stepped closer. "Are you nervous a little?" "Why?" He set down the towel, turned to her. "Because you're still here." She nodded slowly. "Yeah, I am." A pause. "Then I left because I was scared. I came back because I realized that staying scared wasn't the same as staying safe." Eli studied her, and now she shrugged. "Now I'm tired of running." Another beat of silence, thick but soft. "I don't need a fairy tale," she said. "I just need someone who doesn't flinch when I fall apart." "I'm not afraid of messy," Eli replied. "I just want real." Lena smiled, small but sure. "Then I think we're in the right place." He took her hand. She led him. The next morning they walked together through the field behind the house. Lena wore the new boots, breaking them in one step at a time. Emma ran ahead with Maya, chasing grasshoppers and dreams. Eli and Lena followed, not rushing, just moving. "Did you ever think," she asked, "that your life would end up like this?" He chuckled. "Not even close." "But do you want this?" she asked, quieter now. He looked at her really. Looked, and said without hesitation, "Warsaw, I want you. However that looks, however long it takes." She stopped, heart thudding. "You sure I'm more sure of you," he said, "than I've been of anything in a long time." She leaned into him then, forehead against his chest. "Then let's build something. Brick by brick. No grand promises, no guarantees, just a little more every day." Eli wrapped his arms around her, grounding her. "That's how homes are made, Lena. Not all at once, just one nail at a time." And in that moment, boots planted firm in the earth, breath sinking to another heartbeat, she believed him. Truly, finally. She believed him. The long road hadn't ended. But for the first time, it no longer felt lonely. It felt like the beginning of something imperfect, honest, and fiercely quietly real. Autumn arrived like a sigh, soft winds curling through the trees, whispering through fields of gold, brushing porches with leaves and memory. The light had changed. Softer. Slower. Like the world itself had settled down to listen. Eli Brooks stood at the edge of the school parking lot, hands in his coat pockets, his eyes on a crowd of parents and kids filtering through the double doors. The community center's old gymnasium had been converted into a makeshift auditorium for the fall family assembly. Folding chairs, banners made of construction paper, a piano in desperate need of tuning. The works. Beside him, Lena adjusted Emma's coat, fixing her collar like mothers do even when it's perfect. The little girl bounced in place, holding her cue card tight. "She's nervous," Lena whispered. "She'll do fine," Eli said. "She's got your guts." Lena gave a small smile. "She's got your calm." They exchanged a glance, familiar, warm, unspoken, the kind people grow into when the storms have passed, and what's left is trust. Inside the gym buzzed with chatter and camera flashes. Maya waved from her seat in the front row, already holding 2 extra programs in her lap. Lena and Eli sat beside her hands, brushing but not quite clasping. Not because they didn't want to, but because they didn't have to prove anything anymore. The principal took the stage, made her usual jokes about PTA meetings and bake sales. Then the spotlight shifted. A row of first graders shuffled nervously across the front riser. Emma stood in the middle, her cue card trembling slightly in her grip. But when her eyes found her mother's, and then Eli's, something settled. She stepped forward and spoke. "My name is Emma Monroe, and this is what home means to me." A pause. "Then home is not where you sleep, or where your bed is. It's where you're not scared anymore. It's where people don't leave. It's pancakes in the morning and porch lights at night. It's someone who knows when you're pretending you're fine, and waits anyway." Lena inhaled sharply. Maya reached over and gently took her hand. Emma finished clear and certain. "Home is not a place, it's a person. Or maybe 2. And I found them." Applause filled the room. Not the loud, raucous kind, but a slow, heartfelt ripple. Eli blinked once hard. Lena wiped her cheek without hiding it. Emma returned to her spot. The rest of the program continued songs. Skits a little boy who lost his pants mid-performance. Life in all its messy, beautiful ordinary. But Lena's heart stayed right there, frozen in that moment. Her daughter stood tall and told the world the truth she herself had only recently begun to believe. That night, the house was quiet again. Emma lay sprawled on the couch in her pajamas, snoring softly, still clutching her program. Maya sat at the table working on a school project, earbuds in and head bobbing to music. Eli stepped onto the back porch, where Lena stood with a blanket around her shoulders, staring up at the stars. "She wrote that speech herself," Lena said without turning. "Didn't even show me." "She didn't need to," Eli replied. "She already knew you'd understand." Lena glanced over at him. "How did we get here?" Eli leaned against the railing, 1 mile at a time. She laughed softly. "You ever think about the bench?" He nodded. "Almost every day." She shook her head in disbelief. "You didn't even know us. 1 sentence, that's all it took." "You're coming with me," he said, voice low. "And you meant it." "I still do." They stood in silence for a long moment, the wind brushing past like an old friend. Then Lena turned, facing him fully. "I've been thinking." "That sounds dangerous." She rolled her eyes. "I'm serious." Eli gave a lopsided grin. "I'm listening." "I want to stay," she said. "For good. I want to stop waiting for the sky to fall. I want to build something not just for Emma or Maya, but for me too." Eli stepped closer. "You already are." Lena looked up at him, her voice steady. "You were the first person who didn't flinch at my mess, who didn't ask me to be smaller or quieter or cleaner. You just made room." He reached for her hand, his thumb brushing over hers. "You made it easy," he said. "No," she whispered. "I made it hard. You just never let go." Eli smiled, eyes crinkling. "That's the thing about long roads, Lena. They only matter if you have someone walking beside you." "So let's keep walking," she said. Where to? She leaned in forehead against his. Anywhere, as long as the porch light's on. Weeks later, a pair of old boots sat by the front door, their soles worn, their shape familiar. Beside them, a new pair still breaking in. And every evening without fail, the porch light clicked on at dusk. A small, ordinary light. But for Lena Monroe and Eli Brooks, it meant everything. It meant they were no longer walking alone. It meant the road had led them at last to where they were always meant to be. Home. And just like that, the long road didn't feel so long anymore. If this story touched your heart in any way, we'd love to know where in the world are you watching from. Your stories, your presence, they make this little corner of the internet feel like home. If you haven't yet, feel free to subscribe to Soul Moment Story so you won't miss the next journey, one filled with grace, resilience, and the quiet power of kindness. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for spending your time with us today. Until next time, take care of yourself and of each other.